Hi. So a few days ago, I read that the United Nations has officially designated November 18th to mark the World Day for the Prevention of and Healing from Child Sexual Exploitation, Abuse and Violence. It's a long name, I know, but very important. And I think my first reaction was joy, in the sense that I was like, wow, there's a day for this. And I mean, there are many other days. I think this is equally an important day because this is something that's very close to my heart. Protection of children, especially because of the work I do and what I'm passionate about. And also importantly, because I know many people, some people whom I've known the longest, who suffer from a lot of trauma as a result of child abuse, be it physical, sexual, and other forms of, abuse and violence against children. And it's something that we have statistics. We can say 1 in 4 girls and boys, 1 in 2 this and that. Statistics are important, but for me, I think, knowing people personally, being able to attach names to those statistics makes such fights very powerful. And to some of us, these people are our sisters, cousins, brothers, friends, and to many others, we call them me, myself, and I. So there's nobody that would say they don't know anybody who has suffered from such violence. And even if you don't know, I don't think you must know somebody who has been victimized or who has suffered from something before you're able to sympathize or empathize with people. So there's a lot I have to say, but I'll try my best to keep it short. So of course the UN, I would say they're doing a very brilliant work, and I cannot deny that there's been progress in terms of fights and in terms of ensuring people are protected, especially children from different types of backgrounds, marginalized children that are underprivileged, children living in various forms of emergencies as a result of, let's say, climate change, or let's say terrorist attacks, among others. So I acknowledge the work that member countries are doing, and we are less than a decade from the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in as much as there's a long way to go, we would still say that we've come a long way. So yes, kudos to the UN member nations and every other stakeholder that is contributing their quota to ensuring that we create and we leave behind a more sustainable world, which means a better, more peaceful, more inclusive, safer, healthier world for generations to come. So for this particular day, which is the World Day for the Prevention of and Healing from Child Sexual Exploitation, Abuse and Violence, I would say that, like many other days, I would encourage us to ensure there's progress and not just promises, and ensure that we as individuals and as a collective, that's as a society, play our roles to ensure that every child, regardless of their background or identity, is protected and treated with dignity. And what does that entail? First, from the home. Many people, everybody belongs to one family or the other, be it a close-knit family, nuclear family, or extended. We all belong to one family or another, and their children are missed, and we were all children at some point in our lives, and there should be some form of care and support. A lot of people have childminders, have caretakers, children attend nursery schools, primary schools. Let's ensure that they're protected. I mean, there's only so much we can do, but let's ensure that we pay attention to the people who we who we pay or support to take care of our children. Let them be trained, let them be educated on the repercussions of doing bad, the repercussions of abusing, violating children and exploiting children. That's from the home. If possible, for those who can afford some forms of surveillance like CCTVs and the rest, make sure you do so. There are many children who live in internally displaced people's camps and other communities, and regardless of their current situations, I believe that they equally deserve to be supported. every child, regardless of what social stratification they belong to, regardless of their background, whatever it is, every child should be supported and protected. They should know how to report and know that they will be protected, and there will be, response mechanisms for them, and also people who, attend to these children, NGO workers, volunteers, people who belong to civil society organizations, whatever capacity and whatever their role is, they should equally be trained, on safeguarding child protection. And let them also know that, these roles and responsibilities are very serious. And if at all they do anything, regardless of how big or small it is, there are repercussions, there are punishments, there are sanctions for those actions. I think because many times it's like people just say things like this will happen, but they almost never happen. So many people are like, what's the worst that could happen? But it's high time that we started making sure that people actually paid for their crimes, for the offenses they commit, especially against children. So let there be all these mechanisms and training, let there be evaluation, let there be many of these things put in place. It should go and it should translate from policy formulation to implementation. It should translate from just frameworks and solidarity statements to actions, real actions, because this thing is so personal to me, because I've met lots of, we call them victims, sometimes we call them survivors, but I've met many people, many children who have been affected by this big issue, and their lives are never the same. I mean, they're adults who are still dealing, with childhood trauma, and it's something that you cannot really explain. It goes from anxiety, and depression, to infections and diseases that you deal with, to self-esteem issues, to many people not just having suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, but to actually killing themselves. Lots of people have lost their lives because they cannot deal with it. So this is something we should take seriously. And especially children, they may not be able to speak up, they may be scared, or they may not be able to explain what it is that happened. But sometimes, to the best of our abilities, when we see changes in children, in their behaviors, in their countenance, let's start, investigating why are these children changing. Many times when children, start, performing poorly in school, people start saying, oh, you're not serious anymore, you started playing, you started, hanging out with bad friends. But sometimes it's actually bigger than that. They're dealing with a whole lot, but they're unable to speak up. Another thing I want to talk about is, therapy. Therapy is something that a lot of people need. And then because this day is talking about healing from child sexual exploitation, abuse, and violence, I think, I'm not a medical professional, but I would argue that mental health is as important as physical health. People may argue differently, but that's what I think. And so we should equally treat, access, to therapy as important. Many people cannot access, and therapy should also be made affordable. It's so expensive, and I understand, that it's a very, very big, kind of thing to handle. And I really say kudos to all the, therapists and all the psychologists and all the professionals that are, in this field. It's not a small job at all. I'm not saying it is, but I'm just saying that when it comes to financing, funding, when we're saying fund, education fund, the medical profession, we should equally include this, because people should be able to access therapy at a very, very affordable, rate, because this is something many people need. And if possible, part of the mechanisms for development, this should also be included, because there are many children who have been exploited, who have been abused and violated, in all these underprivileged communities that many INGOs, CSOs, and agencies, are present in many of those countries that we term developing, underdeveloped, and all of that. Many of these children cannot afford it. Their parents, their guardians cannot afford. So please, therapy should be made affordable and accessible. Another thing I would say is we should follow up. We should follow up on, okay, what progress has been made, because this is not just, setting aside November 18th to mark this day, but it should be all year round, on a daily basis. what are the measures that we'll put in place to ensure that children are protected? There's a lot of sexual slavery going on, a lot of exploitation happening. People are selling, human beings, people are buying. So what are the measures that are being put in place, by organizations, all around the world, whether grassroots organizations or international organizations, to ensure that we follow up? So like I said earlier on, there's lots of progress that has been made, but since this day has been set aside, I am begging all the stakeholders involved, all the people in power, all the people with the resources, to ensure that real change, tangible and measurable change is made, so that people can live a life that is free from all forms of violence and abuse, so that children can be children, so that children can be free, so that they will not be, their innocence, their sense of hope and positivity will not be taken away from them. There are lots of practices that go on, from child marriage to other forms of practices that are also a part of exploitation, a part of sexual exploitation and abuse. So what are we doing about it? All the, reports that have been made, how many of them have translated from reports and documentation to real action? How many people have actually gotten justice? How many of these perpetrators, how many of these abusers, how many of these rapists have actually faced the law? How many of them, let's just basically ensure that progress is made, that yes, justice is served. Let's follow through. I mean, it's not an easy job, and there are different people at different levels that are playing different roles. Not everybody will be at the forefront, not everybody will be able to carry placards, not everybody will be able to speak to media houses. Some people are at the background doing some other jobs that are equally important, but together let's ensure that really children live a life free from all forms of exploitation, abuse, and violence. There's a lot I wanted to say. I'm not sure if I covered it all, but really, let's just help create a better, safer, and more sustainable world where every child has a fighting chance. So please, like I said, progress and not just promises. Thank you.